Ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, how are my snipers doing today? I hope you guys are doing fantastic. Listen, today we're going to be talking about the one and only Zebec. Now, before we jump into this video, I will say later's video, or I guess, yeah, later on today, we will be talking about how important Stripe actually is and how influential it's going to be towards Zebec, okay? Because we didn't really break that down last video. So we are going to do that later on today, probably the 1 p.m. Eastern upload. So make sure to tune into that video because I'm telling you guys, I don't think people realize like generally how much Zebec is doing and how big these updates are, how big these partnerships are. I know everyone is always thinking about Coinbase and Binance because, you know, that's what you're taught, right? Like, oh, the exchange listings means automatic pump and da 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 da. And of course, Coinbase, Binance has always some good influence. And it really depends on the context. But when you look at the context of something like Zebec, you know, I always say I believe we are way past that point. But anyways, we will be talking about Stripe in the video that is coming up at 1 p.m. Anyways, let's dive into the basics and then let's look at the technical analysis. We can see we're ranked 152 out of 9,009 active cryptos. So we can see, right, that there's a lot of active cryptos that are just dropping off, right? We were at 9,500 something in its peak and we're almost below 9,000. So, you know, a good chunk of cryptos are just disappearing. They're not getting sustained. Probably most of them are meme coins, but even then, you know, I'm sure there's still some decent coins here or there that just are no longer here. Anyways, right, we can see that we are at 222 million market cap, 7 million volume. So yes, volume has been generally slow over the last little while, but to be honest, right, it's not necessarily the worst thing. It's not necessarily a bad thing at all. In fact, because, you know, it's kind of expected, right? It is kind of expected. And like I said, low volume does usually equal reversals just around the corner. We can see though, right, in the last month, we have gone down an average of 5%. In the last week, we are up roughly 2.2%, but we can see generally sideways movement. Over the last day, we are up a little bit over 3%. No Coinbase, no Binance yet, keyword yet that I always use. We can see at the current moment, we are rising in holders. We are averaging probably a decent amount. I mean, there was one day where we only went up 2, but that's probably the weekend as well. But generally, we can see we probably are averaging 30 to 40 new holders a day during the slowest time of the market. So it's really not that bad. Like, it generally is not that bad. When we go and look at something like this, we can see, ladies and gentlemen, that, you know, the price action, like I said, has been fairly slow. It has been just kind of whatever over the last little while. But, you know, that, like I said, that doesn't necessarily mean it is a bad thing. Listen, right? We are trying to attempt for a reversal, right? We can see we have some support here in recent times. And in fact, when you go pull it up, this support actually is valid all the way up until the beginning of November. We can see that, boom, we have a line over here, another one here, multiple here. So this zone, right, we talked about how this zone actually has a good amount of foundation, and that, to be honest, it's actually a pretty darn good zone, and that we could be seeing some type of lifeline. And that's exactly what's happening right now. We can see that we did sweep the most recent bottoms, classic manipulation, taking out certain zones. Boom, right? This double bottom swept. Instant reversals. We were going sideways a little bit, and now we're continuing to push higher and higher. So we did burst above this zone where we have been ranging between 0.0027 and the 2.9, and we can see we are just continuing to go with decent momentum. And you know what, the next big thing we are going to look at in terms of structure is actually getting above the 0.003, because that is kind of the main area that is the most relevant for us right now. So yeah, we have to burst through this. We really have to try to attempt to go above it. what I would like to see is when we do go up here that, we don't just sell off, right? We don't just stay here a couple hours and sell off. That would be the least optimal thing, because you can see, like, for example, yes, the context was a little bit different here, but when we went up and we attempted this, we just instantly sold off, right? When Zebec was actually reversing and it had to retest off this zone here, it was only here for a couple of hours, maybe a day, and then it bursted to the upside. So generally, right, we don't want to see a quick sell off. What we would want to see, and would be the most ideal, is for us to come to the zone. If we do get a sell off, it would be very, very slow, very, very minor, and kind of just us going sideways, right? That's really what we want to see, because when you start to go sideways off a sell zone, that usually means the sell zone is invalidated, and it does mean that buyers are still in control, right? Because it only makes sense if we're supposed to sell off a certain zone and we don't, right? That means obviously the buyers are in control. So yeah, so that is what we're looking at for now in terms of the short term. Remember, at the end of the day, something like Zebec is, very bullish on the yearly candle. So we can actually, in theory, be flipping, and be going to upside pretty nice. All right. But the thing is, the problem is with crypto, I guess, is that we're always tied to Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin's going to be struggling and it's not altcoin season, something like Zebec will be struggling as well. The big thing I'm looking for is this yearly candle right here. Now, the reason why I am looking over there is because, right, when we go and look at it, we actually are creating a institutional type of structure. So I would not be surprised if in 2026, in the beginning, we tap in somewhere around the 0.0019 or the 0.002, and then we continue to blast off throughout the rest of the months, because that would make the most amount of sense. And I wouldn't be surprised, right, if we take out the most relevant 6-month candle of 0.0021. We talked about how overall in 2026 is when we expect Zebec to be moving. And I've been saying that since pretty much October, maybe even late September, right? We've been talking about this for some time. So this should not really be a surprise for anyone unless you are a new viewer, right? But that's something you can even go back on, you can check. We have been talking about this for a very, very long time. And yeah, I expect manipulation. I expect certain sweeps. And then once we get going, I believe we will get going, because, we are still in this zone. At the end of the day, we are kind of still in this zone over here. And time is ticking, people, right? We are closing in the gaps, and there's only so much more that our beloved Zebec can move. And that is just the reality of the situation, right? There's only so much we can do. There's only so much we can move. So we will be monitoring everything. We will be looking at everything as well. And I do believe, the Zebec overall is going to do a fantastic job throughout the years. I know that's not everyone's plan is to hold throughout the years, and that's fine. But generally speaking, I do believe Zebec is here to stay long term, right? If you actually do have a long term mindset, the 5-10 year mark, like a genuine long term mindset, you should not, to be honest, even be looking at these videos every single day. I mean, you can, but you should not stress out about the micro moves, is what I meant to say, right? Because the micro moves are going to be, eating you out, especially pause, hold on a second, but they will be eating away at you if you do care about them too much. But even if you are looking at Zebec and you are looking to hold it for upwards of a year, then, to always remember that all of this structure is pretty much relevant, because I do believe 2026 is going to be a fantastic year, and I personally cannot wait. I know not everyone has the same bias. I know not everyone has the same views, but I'm telling you, based off the charts I'm looking at Zebec overtaking many cryptos and becoming a top 30, 20, 10 coin. And I'm being very genuine right now. That is all to me, though, ladies and gentlemen. I hope you guys did enjoy. I love you guys so, so much. I'll talk to you guys next time. Goodbye.